Okay, welcome everybody. Welcome. I am Jessica Mcilveen, founder of Kids Yoga Therapy, for those of you who have not seen me as yet. So as you may or may not know, I've been conducting an interview series over the last few months now, really with the intention to get some new ideas out there, starting to bring language to different experiences, feelings, sensations, thoughts that our children have or experience, ones that we might not understand, ones that we've never really thought of before, because unless we have the language to understand it, quite often that means we can't relate to our children in the way that they need us to. So I have discovered and come across Olive Hickmott. So she is, we've been chatting for a little bit now before we pressed record, and I have to say that you're really going to come out of this with an amazing insight and some new ideas on how to relate to your children when it comes to learning difficulties. So Olive is a health and wellbeing coach, and she's really providing a different perspective on how we can assist and support our children when it comes to learning difficulties and what that means for them. So Olive, I thank you so much for joining me.
Pleasure.
And where are you joining
for inviting me?
Thank you. Where are you joining us from?
Oh, from the UK. I live just north of London.
Okay.
And apologies if you can hear my dogs barking in the background.
That's okay. You've got dogs, we've got rain, so there's a bit of noise in both parts. So I'd love for you to share, Olive, a little bit about yourself, and I guess how you came to be this coach and this person that you are, authoring all of these incredible books and doing the work that you do. So I'll pass it over to you for a bit of an intro.
I mean, where did I start? I mean, I think I started when I was very young. If I'd been born today, I would have been diagnosed as dyslexic, but I'm too old to have actually been diagnosed. And as I've worked in this field, I've realized that I'm pretty ADHD as well, with a bit of Asperger's thrown in, but that's fine, because nowadays we talk about neurodiversity, and I'm definitely very neurodivergent, and I love it. And I started years ago with, I think it's about 15 or 16 years ago now, when I discovered, somebody told me how good spellers spell. And I went, you what? I have no idea what you're talking about. And so I asked a few of my friends, this was in an NLP training, and I asked a few of my friends over coffee whether they could spell like that, and like they went, yeah, that's easy. And I went, this is ridiculous. I've never even thought of doing that. And I was a poor speller. I could read, but I couldn't remember anything I read. And which is really boring, by the way. That really puts kids off faster than anything else.
Absolutely.
And then so I launched into, the minute I learnt this skill, which I have to tell you was taught in 10 minutes, I walked into my local special needs school and said, have you got any kids who've got literacy problems? And they said, yeah, we've got hundreds, which ones do you want? And so I started working with these kids and realized that the NLP spelling strategy needed a bit of work to be done to solve the problem with dyslexia, because some of these kids have got such strange mental imagery or no mental imagery of words that we needed to teach them how to do it. And so I developed that, and then cracked dyslexia from the point of view of mental imagery. And I've now become an expert in mental imagery for all neurodiverse kids and adults. And so it's been an interesting journey. It's full of surprises. And if you talk to parents who've got children with a diagnosis of ADHD or dyslexia or autism, they've never actually been told anything about mental imagery. And I'm sorry, but we're letting them down. If they've never heard the words mental imagery, then we are definitely letting them down. a lot of schools would say they are committed to multisensory teaching and learning, which means you can teach visually, but it doesn't mean you know what's going on in somebody's head as they're learning visually. And so that's I call it the elephant in the room. That's the bit that nobody talks about. Everybody uses. People use mental imagery every day. And I'll give you a few examples. How do you know what your husband looks like, or your parents look like, or your kids look like? Because you've got a mental image of them in your head.
Sure.
And how do you know where you live? You know, people know how to get home normally because they've got mental images in their head of where they go and where they turn right and where they turn left. So we all use mental imagery. There is only one group of people, to my knowledge, who are actually taught about mental imagery, and that's elite sports people. Because if you can imagine doing a pole vault, for example, you've got to pick up the pole, you've got to run along the track, you've got to stick it in the ground, you've then got to climb up the pole, and then you go over the bar. You do all that by mental imagery rehearsal, hundreds and hundreds of times. And that's the only group of people, in all sports are like that, they talk about mental imagery a lot. And so I've just developed more and more understanding of how mental imagery in learning is meant to work. And then, of course, you come across how does it affect various learning difficulties, and it affects all of them. So if they're learning differently, then it's going to affect everybody. And then what goes wrong when you're either overwhelmed by mental images or you haven't got enough for literacy, and then how do you improve them? So that's what I focus on.
Yeah, incredible. So for those watching that has never heard of mental imagery or images, right? So what is your best explanation for somebody well, you gave us a few examples, but when you're working with children who say they have a lot and then some don't have many at all, so what are the key differences between these children that you're working with? So what is that like for them in their world?
For example, there's sort of 5 major topics. One topic is safety and anxiety and fear and everything else. Now, a lot of that can be generated by your own mental images, because if you've got out of control mental images, I always describe for the parents who've got autistic children, if their child has got hundreds of mental images running around in their head and they're only 2 years old, what do? They close down their peripheral vision so they can only see centrally. They concentrate on, I'll use a pen because I haven't got a train here. They concentrate on one of their cars or their train right close to, and they keep everything else out of their world because it's overwhelming. And so they'd rather sit in the corner and play with the train and ignore everybody else, please.
Okay. So with that there, Olive, can I ask you a question then? So
sure.
When we've got ASD kids and one of the aspects of being diagnosed with that is having these fixations. Okay. Yep. So is that playing a part there for you when you say?
You mean if they're having a fixation on a train, for example?
Correct. Yeah.
Absolutely. That's their natural inclination is to close down the chaos, which means you close down your peripheral vision. You only look at something. I'll give you something a bit more fun to look at. You only look at something really close, and then the rest of the world doesn't exist. Right. And for example, if anybody does sewing or anything like that, they will realize that when they're trying to sew something really intricate, they are doing exactly that. We have this ability of a central vision in our vision and a peripheral vision, and they don't get involved in the peripheral vision. Anybody who works, for example, in an open plan office, they will tend to close down their peripheral vision. So it's a totally natural thing. And if you're overwhelmed by mental images at the age of 2, you manage to do it all without being taught.
Okay. So that's the overwhelm. So that's the overwhelm of mental imagery that will become focused on something, and then the other end of the spectrum.
The other thing is, the other thing is that people often say to me, well, how do I find out about somebody's mental images? Because I don't do brain surgery. How do I find out? And you just ask somebody. Now, I'm going to ask you, for example, to give you a demonstration of, can you picture your car? Have you got a car?
Yes, I can picture it.
You can picture your car. What color is it?
It's white.
Okay, and it's is it a big car or a small car?
It's a medium car.
Medium, okay. And if you walk around it, can you see all the aspects of it? And if you've got any dents and bruises on it, can you see those?
I can.
Right, now, if for the audience who might have been watching you, your eyes are going up because you're looking at mental images, and you can see you walking around it.
Okay.
So you get somebody talking about what they're good at. If they're good at building Lego without the instructions, quite often, ask them how they're doing it. If they're good at football and they score a lot of goals, ask them how they're doing that. Quite often with football, you see the net moving before you actually kick the ball. So ask them about something they're doing which they're really good at already, and they will then proceed to explain to you what their pictures are like. And so most of these kids have got astounding pictures, really, really good. But the only thing is they don't know how to control them. And so the next thing to do, which is what you mentioned earlier, is to get some control over mental imagery. And the way to do that is by grounding, which comes back into yoga. In yoga, everybody knows about grounding. You can't stand on one leg without grounding in the other leg, or you'll fall over. It's my very simple way of looking at it. And so what we need to do is to get these mental images under control, is to get people grounded. Now, there is thousands of ways of getting people grounded. And there is also the question of whether they want to be grounded. If they've got thousands of good ideas flying around in the air, then they might not want to be grounded. If they've been traumatized, they might not want to be grounded, because being grounded makes them feel unsafe. You know, a trauma will make you feel unsafe, and you don't want to be here. So we encourage people to get grounded by a very simple meditation. And so just about imagining their roots coming out the bottom of their feet and going down into the center of the earth and then spreading right out. And some kids you can help them get grounded in 5 minutes. Some will take a lot longer, depending on what their circumstances have been and depending on how traumatized they've been. But basically, once you can get people grounded, then the elephant in the room of mental imagery actually works, because they can then have control over it. So, for example, control over it means, is it still or is it moving? So going back to your car a minute, when you think of your car, is it still or is it moving?
It's still.
Right, can you imagine it moving now? And then going up to some traffic lights and stopping. Okay, so it's now moved and now it's stopped. So you've got control over your mental images. You can either have them still or you can have them moving. And you can do the same with your specialist subject's going to be yoga. And so you can do the same with yoga. You can imagine a move and you can imagine it still or you can imagine it moving. The kids who are struggling with the neurodivergent kids who have got various different diagnoses will more than likely be stuck in movies. So everything's moving all the time, which is pretty terrifying in itself, to be quite honest.
Absolutely.
I remember a little girl who came to see me one day, and she was only about 10. She was sitting in a chair with arms on it. And I said, can you picture a cat? And no word of a lie, her knuckles went white on the side of the chair and she looked terrified. And I went, what are you seeing? And she said, I've got 100 cats and they're all fighting. And so I then said to her, well, some of them obviously need some food. And I joined in with her imaginary 100 cats until some of them went out for a walk, some of them were doing this. And so we eventually ended up with one cat who was sitting on a cushion and absolutely still. Okay. So you have to join in. You have to join in with people's mental images to help them get control.
Fascinating. Okay, yes. And so if we can go, I mean, some of the parents that I work with, Olive, they say, they've expressed to me, well, my child hates to breathe. They can't meditate, they just, it's difficult to get them to do that. So what have you found that works when first and foremost we need to ground these kids? What's a go-to method for you?
Getting them to breathe is really simple once you use a tube of bubbles. Yeah. So to get them to breathe, you want to get them to breathe in quickly and out slowly. So what do you do if you're blowing bubbles? Right? Yep. Prop number 1. 50 pence in the UK, world's cheapest. If you get them to do 6 blows like that, then they probably will have calmed down. If they haven't got bubbles to hand, you can tell them to blow out candles on their cake, on their birthday cake, so they could try that one out. So that's a couple of the ones that we do. So if you try getting them to breathe, literally, it'll be really difficult for them. But blowing out bubbles, every kid, and you've got wonderful feedback with bubbles, because if you don't get a lot of bubbles, you have to blow out slower. And with what you do with embraining as well, one of the first things they teach you is how to get out of your sympathetic nervous system, which is running your life, by breathing in for 2 and out for 6, for example. Yeah. And that's exactly what we do with kids.
Yeah, perfect.
But you have to find a little way that works with kids, and that they can enjoy. If they're too serious about it, it's not going to work anyway.
That's right, exactly. We need to turn it into a game. So we've got them now grounded, and then the next part of your process is to help them get control over their images in their brains. So you've already mentioned. So one method is to get into their world, like you just explained, that little girl and the cats. Are there any other methods that work or that you've found useful?
Basically, once they're grounded, they will be able to get control. Let me see, what else do I do? I've tried slowing them down. So if they've got very fast moving cars going everywhere, I've said to them, okay, I remember, I'll give you a story about this. It probably works best. I had one lad who was mad keen on motorsport, and he got very fast moving mental images, and I was having difficulty getting him grounded. And I went, okay, when you have to do a pit stop on motor racing, they come in and there's a red light and they have to stop, and very quickly they change the tires or whatever it is and they go out again. I said, try doing that with your car. And he literally went, I missed the pit. We did it 3 times before he would actually go, I've got it. I've stopped in the pit lane and I haven't killed anybody. This was all in his imagination.
Yeah. Okay. Incredible.
So you have to find something that they're really familiar with, that they know how to do. Red lights are quite good. Red lights I've used quite a lot.
Yeah. Sure.
If they've got things moving. And so, or another one is, imagine you've got a camera. So if you've got lions in the jungle, in the lions and tigers, for example, and they're all running around all over the place, take a camera. Imagine you've got a camera in your head and you can take a picture of them and see what they look like when they've stopped.
Okay.
Most people are stuck in they're either got control like you have, or they're stuck in videos. They're unlikely to be stuck in stills.
Mm-hmm. Okay, then. All right. Sure. So really, it's about getting that control over the thoughts by these methods. That's really helpful.
it's giving them tools that they can do for themselves, and it's actually fun.
Yeah.
So that's what we do. And then by that time you've got mental images under control and you've got the client grounded, and then you can teach them how to do literacy, for which you need mental images of words, and numeracy, for which you need mental images of numbers.
Yeah. So if we can move on to the schooling and the literacy and the numbers, because, you know, I know we've discussed it already, but a lot of the families that I work with, schooling is such a huge triggering point for these children. It's where a lot of behaviours show up. It's at homework time. It's in school. It's, you know, it's very difficult for children. And so speak through that process for you in terms of mental imagery, if you could.
What I'll say is that in my experience, most behavior is caused by something not working for the child. Children aren't just, in my view, bad. There's something that happens that makes them do some awful behavior. And so whether it's running out of school or whether it's hitting somebody or whatever it is, there's always something behind it.
Yes.
And literacy is often behind it, because if you're struggling with spelling and reading and you're going to school every day, I mean, I'd be extremely miserable because you're not understanding anything. And so that's going to make you have bad behavior. So I tend to always go, I'd rather not talk about the behavior. I'd rather talk about why they're doing that behavior. And if their anxiety level is so raised because all day long they're trying to do spelling and reading that they can't do, then let's try and solve the spelling and reading and then see what happens to their anxiety level.
Yeah.
So to solve the spelling and reading is really simple. I'll do it on you. So can you spell? I didn't think of asking you.
I can spell. Yes.
So if you go to spell a word like giraffe, can you see the word?
I can, yeah.
Okay, there you go. Now, for the audience, her eyes just flashed up to check she could see it. But she's looking forwards at me, and then she flicked up to see that she could see the word. Now, that's a very common thing, is that if you've got somebody who's good at spelling, they don't have to look up, but they quite often look up to check something. So what we do is teach people how to look up, see the word, and be able to reiterate all the letters. So, sorry, would you like to spell giraffe for me? Put you on the spot here.
Yeah. GIRAFFE. Is that right?
Right. So I wasn't actually listening, but yes, you're probably fine. But what we do is we just teach people how to see the words. And it's really simple how to see words, because once you've got your mental images under control, you can then have a picture of a giraffe, and then you can have giraffe written across the middle of the giraffe. And so you've then associated a word with an object.
Yeah, perfect. Okay. And do you do that in the beginning by literally having the word in front of them?
Yeah, I mean, if you were here, I can't do it because you're online, but I would just start with cat and dog, and I would go, picture a cat, tell me what your cat looks like. Is it still or is it moving? Get it under control. Then I would show you a post-it with cat written on it and get you to paint cat on the cat, and then you would be able to start spelling cat. And there's loads and loads of tricks we've got in our training to teach people how to increase the word length, start with nouns, move on to words that are not nouns, move on to those crazy homophones in the English language, and also in Australian, which is words that sound the same and are not spelt the same and have completely different meanings. So all of those come into the training of how do you do this, how do you do this. And then you move on to maths and do exactly the same thing for maths. I have a maths degree, and I always found visualizing numbers really easy. I had never ever thought of visualizing words until 15, 20 years ago, when I got told that that's what good spellers do. And I went, that's ridiculous. I've been visualizing numbers all my life. and I never even thought of visualizing a word.
Yeah. Okay. Incredible. So, and this is the work that you do within the schools, Olive. So,
Yep.
for you,
Well, within schools or with parents,
yeah,
if I work with a child, I always want the parents there, because the
yes,
parents are being driven mad by not understanding why little Johnny can't do what they thought they could do,
yeah,
and what they happen to be really good at. And they have not got a clue, because nobody has mentioned to them the word mental imagery. And mental imagery is how you do visual learning. So it's in the syllabus, but it's not in the teacher training. Teacher training teaches you how to teach visually. So you show pictures to children, not how they learn visually in their heads.
yes, yes. And honestly, like I said to you, I haven't heard this term before, and I've attended meetings in schools. I've attended, allied health meetings with all different practitioners and professionals, and you name it. And it's not a term that has ever come up or in my path at all until now, and it absolutely makes sense. And so, yeah, you go.
In my early days of this, 15 years ago, I read a book called Thinking in Pictures by Temple Grandin, who is a famous autistic lady in the US, who is a professor of animal welfare, I think, and she designs animal pens as her day job, but she is highly autistic. And she explained to me in this book, Thinking in Pictures, how autistic people thought, and how her view of how you got your mental images under control was by medication, low-level medication. And so I learned a lot from her in the early days. But what I found as I've gone through is lots of people are talking about the skills of people who are neurodivergent, who've got amazing visual skills. But what they haven't done is flip it round and go, well, two things. Firstly is, how do they do what they do really well? Let's explore that. And then how do we use that skill for doing something else? For example, for you, if you're really good at visualizing, how can you remember visual yoga moves? And so that you can repeat them because you're visualizing them and you know exactly how to do them, which is no doubt how you do it. And so sorry, I've just lost my train of thought thinking about yoga.
That's good. It instantly calms you.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, if you remember, then interrupt me. But I do have a question in terms of there's a term when we're working with children with various diagnoses called sensory overload, and that's what creates these explosive behaviors and all of that. So how, in your opinion, how does that work in conjunction with, against the idea of mental imagery?
Sensory overload, in my opinion, is caused completely by being ungrounded. If you're grounded, you won't be in sensory overload. And if you're anxious, of course, you won't be grounded. So you've got people who are, when you know the spectrum of frequencies, and I never remember how to explain this, but I'll do my best, is that, for example, a dog whistle, you can't hear with a human ear. And there is fluorescent lights, you're not meant to be able to hear with the human ear, right? How many people do you know of who are autistic who can hear fluorescent lights? They can hear the buzzing in the, it's fluorescent, the right word in Australia?
Yes, it is. Yep.
Yeah. And so they're hearing a different frequency, because that's if you're grounded, you won't hear that frequency. I've even heard people who will explain that they can hear the electricity in the mains, which is terrifying because you've got this continuous droning going on in your head.
Of course.
And so So one way or another, they're either hearing a low frequency or a higher frequency, which is too much. The average human, the neurotypical human, is much more restricted in what they're actually hearing. And so they're not being driven mad by the various noises that people pick up on. Yeah. And sensory overload is caused by hearing too much stuff, and it's because you're not grounded. When you're not grounded, you can hear this stuff.
Okay, so
that's my map of the world, by the way. Yep. You may find scientists who go, "Oh, it's really right."
For some people, this is just going to be a brain explosion, and this is wonderful.
But for almost all of, I mean, I'm on various Facebook groups, and I hear complaints all the time about autistic and ADHD kids, and a lot of them are resolvable through mental imagery and grounding.
Okay, amazing.
Sensory overload is very painful. I'll give you another example. If you're running your body at one frequency and your mum is running at a different frequency, first it's going to be really uncomfortable to be given a hug, because that can actually hurt. I went through a period in my life where I was really ungrounded after a really bad operation, and I couldn't touch anybody. It was agony until I got back in my body again. Mm-hmm. Okay. And of course, that's what yoga's all about, is about getting into your body, isn't it?
That's right, exactly.
Feeling comfortable there.
Yeah, that's right, feeling safe there. And with what you've explained today, Olive, this just adds a whole nother dimension to the work. So I feel I'm learning just as much as everybody else is right here listening. So this is fabulous for me as well. So I guess with what we've already discussed, is there anything that any vital pieces of the puzzle that we've missed or that you haven't? I feel like you could talk forever, and I would happily listen. And we'll discuss where everybody can go to find out more information very soon. But is there anything specifically for parents who are really concerned about their children at the moment in terms of their learning and because they're concerned about their future, and I hear it all of the time, but is there anything we've missed?
I would say getting them probably the number one is getting them to feel safe. Now, if you say that to the average parent, don't freak out, parents. I know you're not beating up your kids, and so they shouldn't be feeling unsafe, but there's all sorts of reasons why kids can feel unsafe, which is nothing to do with the parents' ability to be parents. For example, if they're overwhelmed with mental imagery, they're going to feel unsafe. You've no idea what images they're creating in their head. For example, the little girl I mentioned earlier with cats. I had a boy once who I said, "Can you picture a lion?" And he literally jumped off his chair and stood behind it, because his image of the lion was so big in front of him. When he was only little, he thought the best thing to do was to run behind his chair. So they can frighten themselves to death with their own images, depending on what they are. And of course, if there's any abuse or anything like that, they can recycle all of those, which is even worse. But a lot of it is just born out of trauma, which has got probably nothing to do with the parents. For example, if a child has a bad birth, then not really mum's fault, it's normally just the way it is, but they can actually be traumatized by a bad birth. Mm-hmm. And so the best thing to do is to try and make them feel safe in everything they do, not just safe in crossing the road, which is one problem, but safe in, if you're eating a meal, then giving them, putting out a sort of buffet where they can help themselves, and they're not going to be told off for the bits they don't eat, but they're going to be congratulated on the bits they do eat, is a way of making them feel safe. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Congratulating kids on what they do right is incredibly important. Yeah. And there's a lovely guy called Harold Glasser from the US who does a lot of work on what he calls the nurtured heart approach. where he very much focuses on what kids do right, even if it's only for 5 seconds.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter, because the more you point out what they're doing right, the more right you're going to get, rather than always pointing out what they're doing wrong.
Yeah, exactly. Absolutely.
So safety for me comes first. The second thing is talk to them about what they're doing that's really clever. And the other thing is, most people who are doing something with mental imagery they think is clever, that I think is clever, they think is rubbish. They think everybody can do it. For example, an Ordnance Survey map that has contour lines for the mountains? One of my relatives can look at that in 2D and see it in 3D. So all the mountains are standing up. He's a mountain guide in Canada, which is a really handy skill. He just looks at the map and then looks at the mountains, and it's obvious which way to go. But when I'd said to him, that's an amazing skill, he went, no, everybody can do that. I went, no. I've now met something like 10 people who can do that. And he just rubbished it. He just thought it was just obvious. Everybody could do it. So whatever they're good at, whether it's putting Lego together without the instructions, or IKEA furniture for that matter, or anything that they are really good at, then start talking to them about how they do what they do. That will cheer them up no end, for starters, and actually get them into their mental imagery and understanding it.
Okay. Yeah, sure. I guess, if we're explaining a child that has all of this mental imagery and can no longer and can't stop it, so that on top of being in a world where they're given instructions constantly and they're not showing up for us in the way that we want them to, then there's all of this mounting pressure just on top of them constantly throughout their day. And, for me, I know that I would explode. I would explode if there was that amount of pressure on me and I couldn't control my way of thinking. I would.
It's like a can of Coke. You build it up during the day, come home, and then explode all over the place.
Yes.
Because you've shaken it.
Yeah. So you touched on one thing, Olive, about, because, I work with children that have experienced trauma. So this idea of mental imagery for these children, is that any different to a child with, say, ADHD and ASD and dyslexia? Is that different?
In my experience, most of the children who are learning differently have got some level of trauma or anxiety from a very young age, even before they're born.
Okay. And would you still treat
one of the best ways, by the way, is to ensure that parents are calm during pregnancy. Ensure that mum isn't overdoing it, and that actually she's grounded and calm, so the baby can develop in a really safe environment, because they know a lot about what's going on. We know this, even if they're not even born yet.
Yeah, that's right. And so would your work with those children compared to the ASD children be quite similar? That the approach is the same?
Very similar approaches to start with. I mean, if you've got somebody who is severely traumatized, then you might want to move on to something else. But, where I would always start with them with like this, with the topics that we've covered. The first topic is safety. And the parents can do so much about safety. Once they get their heads around, I'm not blaming them for making their child unsafe. For example, there's an incredible thing in the world of NLP, as I'll just explain, is that if you're looking up, your pictures are here. Sorry, I'll say that again. That came out wrong. If you're looking up, you're looking at pictures. If your eyes are going sideways, you're thinking in auditory as to whether you're speaking or whether you're listening. And if you're looking down, you're in your emotions, which might be just emotions or might be your internal dialogue. Now, when you come to cross the street, right, then you normally have some sort of internal dialogue going on that says, don't cross yet, there's a car coming. Whether or not you're aware of it, but you've got some sort of voice saying that.
Mm.
Now, with these kids who are not grounded, they don't access their feelings and their internal dialogue. They're so up here, they're like super visual, visual and auditory, and they don't do emotions. So you'll find that children don't do emotions, but also they don't do internal dialogue. So they'll walk straight out in the road in front of a car.
Mm-hmm.
So there's some little tips like that from NLP land that are just vital for parents to know. You can argue with them as many times as you like about crossing the road, whereas actually the argument should be, can we get you in your body? And then you might stand a chance of accessing your internal dialogue to stop you crossing the road.
Yeah, okay. And for those of you, NLP is neuro-linguistic programming, so that's what it stands for.
NLP I always describe as being just really simply what's going on in your head. And nobody explains this to you. The amount of people that go on an NLP training course and come back going, why didn't I know this before? If you find anybody who's miserable, where are they looking? They're looking down. If you get them to look up, they won't be so miserable.
Yeah, there's a lot of great tips in it. I've just started my course in NLP, so I'm very excited to continue learning it. And you're right, it is just so simple. It's a simple approach to our brain and then how that influences our behaviors.
Exactly.
So Olive, you're an author of many incredible books, and you've got a lot of amazing courses out there. So for parents and professionals that want to do any training or find out more, where can they get some more of this amazing
information? Where can you go? Firstly, all the books are now assembled on a website called www.newperspectives.me.uk. So all the books are called New Perspectives, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay. I'm just doing the 7th at the moment. And if you go to www.empoweringlearning.co.uk, then you will find that's the place where most of the learning stuff hangs out, if you like. And there you will find there's a link to get 2 free chapters of my new book, which the second chapter, which is going to be really invaluable for people because it is, sorry about that, my computer. The second chapter is really invaluable because it talks about the strengths of neurodivergent people and how they really excel. So you'll start reading that and going, oh, my kid can do that. Oh, my kid can do that. So it'll give you some insights into what are the strengths of having these amazing visual pictures. Yeah. And of course, these days, everything is visual. So it's not really surprising that we've got very highly visual children.
Yes.
And sign up there for a newsletter, and you can also sign up there for the practitioner. We do, as I'm in the UK and you're in Australia, it's worth noting that we do home study training for literacy and numeracy, which is the place to start, really. And then we're just bringing out a really short program for ADHD, which is a really squashed down version of our second really big training course, because I know parents of kids with ADHD haven't got time to do anything, basically. So we just made up 4 40, 50-minute videos, and we are currently in the middle of doing the 3rd one, and the 3rd one is on Tuesday next week, and the 4th one is 2 weeks later. And we've got a Facebook page where people can communicate and get more resources as well joined with those. So, but you'll find all of that on empoweringlearning.co.uk.
Okay, amazing. Thanks, Olive. And
pleasure.
I just want to, just a very short end to it, but you touched on we're very image-based, right, in our day and age. So what is your opinion on the impact of all of our games and iPhones and videos and that time? Is that impacting these children in a negative way based on the amount of time they're on it and how fast their images are already rolling?
I'm not an expert on that, I'll have to say, and I probably cop out of that one. All I will say is that they are highly visual, our kids, one way and another. It might be significant that they've used a lot of electronic equipment, but on the other hand, these skills that they're developing are really incredible, and we need all the incredible people on the planet to solve some of the problems at the moment. So I don't want to stop them being incredible at all. I just want them to be able to keep them under control. Because, for example, if you're finding a creative solution to, I don't know, world hunger or whatever it is, then you've got all these ideas flying around in your head and you're finally honing them down into one place. Absolutely great. If you're doing that in the middle of the night and you want to be asleep, that is not a great skill. So what we teach people is how to get control over what's going on. And that's all there is to it. And you know, there's various theories about don't use screens before you go to bed and stuff like that. But on those, I'll just opt out, really. I mean, I did have one lad, which is quite funny, really, who said to me, once he got these mental images sorted out and he got the words sorted out and he was doing absolutely great, he suddenly says, "Oh, this is like Instagram for your brain."
Yeah, she's probably not far off. That's a really great way to explain it. Okay, all right, that's handy. Yeah, okay.
And you know, with Instagram, you can stop them, you can start them.
That's true.
You can have a video, you can have various things.
Exactly.
But you've got the button to control them.
Yeah. Okay, perfect. I'll keep that one in mind. So, Olive, I really appreciate your time tonight, Pleasure. Your morning, my night. And I'll definitely I'll personally be looking more into the training, and for parents, I'll put the links into this video and make sure that it's available to you nice and easy. And yeah, just thank you, Olive. I really appreciate your time.
Pleasure. It has been a delight. Thank you.
Thank you, Olive.
Do tell me do drop